Welcome back, and what a first day. I have to say I'm now an absolute hopping whiz, and I hope you are all too. And I hope you've enjoyed the day and the sessions so far. I understand that we've had nearly 150 people join us throughout the day, and that there's been such insightful and diverse subjects that have been discussed. Personally, I've joined topics such as the digital connectivity, flexible human work, access to finance, and just latterly, no code. And I think a standout theme that's been running through everything is the positive impact of our growing digital and tech ecosystem and the genuine collaboration, innovation, and support that exists within the region. There's so much to celebrate and obviously much more for us to do as always. But now it's time for the Moving Beyond Compliance panel, and it is an absolute honour to introduce Faria Usman. Faria is the founder of Being Woman of Charity, and she's been recently awarded the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service and is the EDI manager at Dynamo. So over to you, Faria, and please introduce your panelists.
Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum, namaste, good afternoon, Kaim Cho, Sat Sri Akal, salam and marhaba. Welcome to this amazing panel. Thank you, Susan, for a very kind introduction. My name is Faria Usman. I'm the EDI manager at Dynamo Northeast, and it is a complete honor to actually run this session during this Dynamo conference. As you can tell from the title, we are named as Moving Beyond Compliance. And I think we have named it because we've spoken about a lot on equality, diversity, inclusion. And as Susan was describing, there's a lot of need to do more collaboratively, move collaboratively, but also to capture the diverse people and their voices are heard. We need to make sure. So as a Northeast Tech Network, we believe that we have a responsibility to do more and to bring out more. So therefore, during this session today, we are going to present with you the findings of our research piece, Think Northeast, along with a panel discussion to see how we are going to move beyond compliance. What is it that we have produced? What are the highlights of our report? But also at the same time, we are going to listen from an amazing panel that we have brought together to join us during this session to look at various aspects of equality, diversity, inclusion. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our panelists. Let us welcome our panelists who are Nitin Shukla from Northumbria Police Services, Rennie Hawkins from ThoughtWorks, Colin Ferguson from Altitude Foundation, and Caroline Preston from the North of Tyne Combined Authority. The panel is definitely going to look at, and we are going to explore together how to move beyond compliance. What is it that we can do as a Northeast Tech Network and us together to move forward and be more diverse and inclusive in our behaviors, in our policies, in our recruitment, and all the way through really making an inclusive tech sector for Northeast, which I am very proud to represent today. But along with that, and before the panelists come on stage, let us show you and let us, go through some highlights of our research piece, as I've mentioned, Think Northeast. So what is the report? As you might be aware, that Dynamo has always been in the front to ensure there's a different view to equality, diversity, inclusion, which is embrace it, dignify it, inspire it. We did our second piece of research last year, and then we have compiled our findings through this year as well. What does that finding mean is that we have tried to capture the views and expressions of people working in the Northeast on issues and challenges of diversity and inclusion within the tech sector. We have captured through a survey of and reaching to 311 professionals views on the overall state of diversity and inclusion, but also the perceptions and experience of working in the sector and what are the response of the sector to diversity and inclusion challenges. In addition, Dynamo is very proud to hold the first EDI, Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Roundtable as well, with attendees from a range of diverse backgrounds and professions within the tech sector. And we looked at to have a better insight and a more in-depth insight by having a face-to-face conversation. So that was great. Northeast sector, as we all know, is very broad, and so we therefore are not claiming, and I would like to be very clear on that, that we as a Dynamo Northeast Network are not claiming that our research is representative of all those working in the Northeast tech sector, but it represents an honest attempt to date to explore these issues. So let me just go through the presentation with yourself so you all can have a view. I think I would like to ask my colleague Claire to have this presentation as well on here, so we can go through that, and then we'll go directly into the panel session with our amazing panelists. So as you can see, and again, this was Think Northeast. The report is named as Think Northeast because I believe that we wanted to focus it towards only Northeast and not like talking about a range of it. We wanted to map out equality, diversity, inclusion in the Northeast sector. Dynamo has kept its stance and is beautiful ways of speaking, embrace it, dignify it, and inspire it. So we'll move ahead with the presentation now, Claire, and thank you so much, Claire, because she's going to lead me on to the presentation, but I'll talk to you through it. Just to be very clear on this report is available on request from emailing if you can send an email to Claire Nicholson or myself, and we would we are more than happy to provide it. This is, we do not have enough time to go through the full report, but I would like to just go on to the key findings that what as a sector we have found through this research. First of all, thank you to everyone who has responded to it. Obviously, as per data protection, we have kept these anonymous, but thank you to everyone who has taken time and has made us reach to 311 respondents. Not everybody has responded to each question, so it might not relate to it, but yes, this very honest attempt of people to respond to our questions that we put in the survey. So the key findings from the report were, if we move, Claire, to our key findings, there is a strong perception that the Northeast sector could do better in terms of how representative is of wider society. And by that, we mean sometimes the pressure is too much on the ethnically diverse people to lead on that, whereas that shouldn't be the case. It needs to be, I think, what the main key finding was, how we are actually funding and valuing the research and how we are designing that research when it comes to equality, diversity, inclusion. Another thing that we found, the second finding, was that we struggle and accommodate that sector itself. It struggles to include and accommodate for a diversity of identities. And the intersectionality, we know that there is there, but sometimes it's lost in the processes, and it's lost in the complex processes for people, challenging practices and processes. The third finding that we got was that, I know, and I'm saying it from the heart because I've met many of you and I've met many of the people representing the top tech sector in the Northeast. There are genuine intentions of organizations who are prepared to value diversity and inclusion, but employees, on the other hand, and people working with them do not think that efforts so far have been made to make the difference that is needed. So I think the point here is there is so much needed. There is much needed collaboration that we need. Another thing that we found out, our main point, was that the actions that organizations take in relation to diversity and inclusion in the workplace, they're often felt to be very reactive and performative. Like, we sometimes feel that if something is going on in a national agenda, we feel that we have to respond to it, whereas people feel that this is not necessarily in response to the region we are representing. So what do we do now? So if we move on to action for change, that's number 8. That's page number 8. So action for change is, yes, as we all see, and I think you all will agree, whoever is listening to me today, it's time for both reflection and action across the Northeast sector. And by that, what I mean is that if genuine change is needed to happen, then there is a need to work collaboratively. We need to have a coherent voice and share best practices, and also at the same time invest the time and resources. So at the end of the report, if you would see that we have set out a series of recommendations, we believe that we must all come together and collaboratively raise voice and to promote equality, diversity, and inclusion in the region. So moving on in the report, I'm also going to go through some of the demographics just for you to know that how many people we have reached. So if we move on to the next page, Claire, if you look at that there in the age, as I said, we reached out to 311 responses. Majority of the responses were from the people who are aged between 25 to 50. As you can see, that's 81.4%. In the gender, this time as compared to our last report, female were more, which comprises 47.3%. Male were not really less, but the female were slightly a bit higher. We can see that there's not many people from the trans and non-binary or LGBT communities. So that's something we still feel that needs to be tackled. In terms of disability, only 3.5% people actually disclose that they are differently abled, and 18.6% said that they preferred not to say. So that's quite a slightly lower number. If we move on to the next slide, in which we'll see the people who are neurodiverse as well. If you see majority, only 5.5%, which is a very, very, it's not a very higher number, say that they consider themselves or they disclose that they are neurodiverse. In religion, if you can see, there's quite a big gap in many religions, whereas Christianity is the most what people follow. There's still a lot of people who identify from Islam and Hindus or Judaism. They were not really there. They were not really represented in the report as well, which is something that we can all work out to reach to. Ethnicity, as you can again say, as compared to our last report, the white majority is more as compared to Black, Asian, mixed, and other. So this is something that whoever is listening to us today, if we look at the recommendations that we have put out in the end of the report, something we can pick up from there. As I've said clearly as well before, if we move on to the next slide, that the survey has been able to capture the views of 311 people who identify working in the tech sector. So just to clarify, these are all the views of the people working in the tech sector of Northeast and not in other sectors. So this is clearly on that. But there are also some questions where we've had less responses from 311. The survey was live for 4 months from July to October 2021. So it was quite a big time. It was quite a long time. We are quite happy that we have doubled the amount of people that we reached last time as well. So that's quite a success for Dynamo Northeast, but I think we still need to do more. We wanted people to think and respond to the questions as well for us to understand where the gaps are and how we can tackle them as well. As I've said before as well, the research did not identify or representative sample or measure the extent of diversity, because we still feel there are many, many people working in the tech sector who we are aiming this year to reach. And I think we are also looking at various ways of changing our research as well this year. So your help is very crucial in that. Time in the Northeast sector, you could see, and we have also you'll be able to see the level of work complexity in job roles. So we have targeted and we have had responses from people who are founders, who are in top management executives, but also who are working in the entry level as well. So moving on to the next page as well, we have also looked at how many people are working in the organization. So this graph is going to give you a bit of an insight of how many people are representatives in one organization, how big that organization is for people. If we move on to the next slide, it also captures workplace requirements, work pattern identified, just so you're aware that people who have responded to this question, to our survey, how are they in the office, or are they traveling, or what is their work pattern as well for us to identify. Moving on to the next slide, we have also looked at the question on diversity at senior or executive level or leadership team. And if you can look at that, there were 301 responses and only 15.6% said yes, whereas majority said no and maybe. So that's something that I think can be achieved by having tangible outcomes. This is not something that we cannot fill in, similar to the diversity in similar roles and the impact of the training, which has always come as a highlight. And I know from my experience and meeting many people, there are brilliant organizations in the Northeast tech sector who are providing and who are working on the training modules as well. So it's really something worth looking at having for your own organization. Moving on to the next one is the extent of the equality, diversity, and inclusion, that how much we are aware of the Equality Act and the policies that we have in place, whether that work with the compliance. And I think my panel today would be able to highlight on this more, that what does the Equality Act states, but how are we actually putting things in place referring to that? Or are we really ready to move beyond compliance? And what does that mean for the people who work for us from the protected characteristics? Then on the next slide, we also tried to this time understand how do people feel around racial justice? How do people feel around their workplace cultures and expectations? And when you'll go into the detail of the report, you'll be able to see the questions and how much people have agreed on strongly disagree and strongly agree as well. So moving on to the next slide is all these questions, which will give you a bit of highlight of how is the experience of a person working in the tech sector, or whether in the organization they are representing. If you move on to the next slide, you would be able to see the experience of the unwelcome comment or conduct. And I'm so pleased that 188 people said that they have never had any experience of this. But at the same time, I'm quite worried to see the amount of number, though, you know, many people would say it's less, but hurtful gossip is 51, and whereas isolating behavior and isolation. Now, these are all these behaviors that are harmful for not only a person, but also for an organization. And these can be tackled by working together. Again, my panel would be able to highlight, and we would be able to ask them for their best practices they might have in their organizations to tackle. That again comes into the discrimination. Even if it's, when it comes to discrimination or any sort of discrimination or racism or based on race or ethnicity or gender, if one person is feeling that they've been discriminated, I think that says a lot, that we really need to work to make sure that everybody has a psychologically safe working space for all. Now, coming back to the next slide, we have the mental health at work. As you might remember from our last report, we had Poppy Jaman from Mental Health First Aid England speaking about the importance of mental health at work and how important it is, especially after the COVID. It has become the main priority for many areas, for other public sectors. So that is something we tried to ask from the tech sector too. Still, the people do struggle from mental health. There is a taboo, and how do we tackle that is something that we have provided some recommendations on as well. In the next slide, we have tried to see the evaluation and promotion and challenging personal bias, because as you can tell from the name of the report, Think Northeast, it is important that we are also open and honest about how do we challenge our personal bias. And I'm very happy that people have been very honest to respond on this. So thank you again, everybody, for responding to our survey. Into moving on to the data insights, and I'm very conscious of time, and we have our panel as well. I won't go further into it, but I think overall, we think we could do we could do very much better in terms of how representative are we of the wider UK tech sector, the extent to which diversity and inclusion is valued within the organization, and how do we invest more time, more commitment, more resources, more funds into the research that we are doing. Because once we do have that, then we are able to reach wider and wide. When it comes to ethnically diverse communities, obviously that says that they're not very well represented in the sector, and the concerns emerge around the extent of socioeconomic diversity as well. There's also a clear scope to take diversity and inclusion now more seriously. And how do we keep on funding that? In addition, as I've previously said, moving on to the next slide, Dynamo takes pride in holding the first EDI roundtable as we had. And we are very happy and pleased to have many representatives from the tech sector. So if you move on to the next slides, you would be able to see in the report that it is not only us and we have not tried to write anything, only that what we have recorded through the survey. We have taken a more collaborative approach and have compiled of all the feedback that the people in the roundtable provided to us. So on the next slides in the report, you would see a lot of activities that we did in the roundtable around statement starters. How do we make sure that EDI is the topic of conversation? How do we make sure that we limit the barriers that are, the barrier that we face when we are trying to promote D&I as well? But also at the end, we thought of how, as an innovative point of view, what can we bring in together to make sure we are centralized, we make sure that the EDI is at the heart of everything that we do. I'm very, very grateful to everybody who attended the EDI roundtable with us. That brings us to the end of our conclusions and recommendations slide. Claire, if we move on to there, in which we have tried to add in all the conclusions and recommendations that we feel that could help you and that could help the tech sector. And we are very, very open to feedback and working together. Coming forward in the recommendations, we have 5 recommendations this time, simple, easy lines, and you can read more. So on the next slide, we have recommendations: build a culture of reflection, support, and transparency, develop meaningful action plans that actively involve our staff and our people in design and implementation, commit the necessary resources. As you can see, I've openly spoken about how much investment needs to be done in EDI. Welcome the challenge and be willing to collaborate. You can read more about these recommendations. And moving on, in the end, thank you very much for listening. Now is the time that we would invite our panel to be here. Before we do that, Dynamo has done massive work on our action so far. Because we as Dynamo, we also want to put ourselves forward. We have invested our time and resources in understanding equality, diversity, inclusion ourselves. We have also produced and reviewed strategies within the Dynamo board, within the Dynamo team, and we also use our power to advocate for this change and to advance the D&I practice. So this is what we have been doing. We are not saying we're the perfect, and we do not claim to be, but we are very open to working together in the Northeast tech sector. Thank you so much for listening. I would like to acknowledge some people before I ask onto the panel to come along. James Hall from Monster Lab, because he's been very kind enough to give us his space to host the EDI Roundtable. Ellison Frere from Super Network. Sarah Thakre and Claire, always supporting us and always supporting me personally and professionally to write and compile this report. Kate Carlson from Opencast Software, and images by Hussein Al-Haj Musa, because they are all real people who you'll see in the report. So let's welcome our panel on the stage now. Without further ado, Nitin Shukla, Rini Hawkins, Colin Ferguson, and Caroline Preston. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel, Moving Beyond Compliance. So if you could all just briefly introduce yourself, and we'll move on to a discussion. I think that would help us to understand, how we can move beyond compliance, but also to listen from you the best practices or any feedback that you have had. So let's start from Nitin Shukla, please.
Good afternoon. Really great to be able to join the panel this afternoon. So I've worked primarily in the public sector for about 30 years or so. And within 20 years of that has been within the EDI sector. I was with Gateshead Council for 12 years, where I took a lead on EDI, and I currently work with the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office for Northumbria. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you very much, Nitin. Next up, we have Caroline Preston.
Hey everyone, so Caroline, I work for North of Tyne Combined Authority, and a lead on the Good Work Pledge, which some of you will have heard about, and that's all about businesses demonstrating that they're good employers. My background is also Gateshead Council for 12 years, supporting businesses, working in International Business Centre for digital and tech businesses. So bringing all of that over to North of Tyne and supporting businesses with a Good Work Pledge.
That's great. Thank you. We are still, I think, we are waiting for Colin Ferguson and Renee. I think that we were having some tech complications there, but while they are going to come to the panel, Is it all right if we start the discussion with you, Nitin? Obviously, you have seen the report that Dynamo has compiled. This is our second piece of research that has brought in a lot of highlights from the Northeast tech sector. What it would be if we, what it looks like when Northeast tech sector respond positively to the diversity of voices. Do you think that the report obviously has got, it lacks a lot into the diversity of ethnically diverse communities present there? How do we make sure that the voices from the margins are welcomed center stage?
First of all, the reports to be welcomed. I guess for me, it's around, and it's a really good report. And, in my experience, I've seen lots of really good work that's gone on in terms of looking at really tackling EDI and recommendations that come up. And it's really, it's really, really important that we then do something with that, because my frustration in working in this space, in terms of the EDI space, is that sometimes it's the conversations that we continue to have year on year, and inequalities continue to exist. So this has to make a real difference, in terms of how we tackle inequalities. And I'm really pleased that this is beyond compliance. I think our legislation is ineffective. We continue to experience inequalities in employment, education, housing, and the list goes on. And so reports such as the one that's been produced and the work that we actually do really does need to have start, in terms of making that difference. For me, it's really, really important, first of all, that I think you said about hearing, in terms of people being able to engage and contribute, for us to have a really good understanding of our communities. The communities continue to change and are more, in terms of the demographics, are more diverse. And so how do we ensure, because we sometimes use the phrase hard to reach, and it isn't the fact that people are hard to reach, it's really ensuring that we make effort to ensure the voices of the least heard are actually taken on board. But for me, the crucial thing where I've seen where we've made a difference has been where there's been leadership buy-in. So where organizations, where the EDI agenda is driven by the leaders within the organization, that's where we'll actually see real difference and change. And I can give some examples later on of what I mean by that, where this has actually been driven by leadership, that this is important for the organization, it's part and parcel of what they do. So I'd be happy to share a couple of examples of where I've seen some really good practice around this agenda being driven by leadership.
That's great. Thank you very much. And thank you for highlighting the importance of legislation and how it plays a part in our policies and procedures. We have been joined now by Colin and Renee. I personally apologize for all this technical difficulties. So sorry about that. And before we move ahead, how about, Colin, we hear from you, your introduction, and then Renee, yourself.
Sure thing. Thank you. My name's Colin. Obviously, I'm the General Manager of Altitude Foundation. We're a social mobility charity that works in the Northeast to support young people to develop digital skills, programming and coding. So a lot of the way that we engage with this agenda and think about it is through a particular kind of socioeconomic lens, and also thinking about that kind of long-term development of bringing a greater diversity of talent into the workplace. So we're particularly thinking about how the EDI agenda affects young people and how we support them to develop the skills that they need for the future workplace.
That's great. And it's so great to see that we have you today, because we believe and we firmly believe that and Dynamo has a very strong belief in it to reach to young people, and their voices are heard and they're included in everything. So thank you very much. Let's move on to Renee Hawkins. Renee,
yeah,
you are representing ThoughtWorks. We're very pleased to have you. Let's hear from you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I work with ThoughtWorks. I started off my career as an engineer, which was kind of rare back in the day. And, you know, I think I've faced a lot of that, you know, lack of diversity within the organization in the early doors. And I'm really proud. I've been with ThoughtWorks for 18 years. I'm really proud of, you know, how we started this focus on diversity and inclusion and equity a long time ago. And, you know, we're seeing that now 40% of our global business has gender diversity, and we now focus on other angles of diversity as well. So it's something that we believe is the right thing. As we build technology for the world is diverse, and we want to represent that with the software that we build.
That's great. So let's moving on to our discussion and the panel, and you would be able to have the report as well to read. I think coming back to the topic, and I would like to go to Caroline Preston, if you could let us know, because you lead on the Good Work Pledge from the North of Tyne Authority. How do we ensure, and how do you, if you can give us a bit of example of, do you think Good Work Pledge is beyond the tick box exercise and the compliance?
Hi everyone. Yeah, I think there's the Good Work Pledge is a really simple layout of what businesses can do to start exploring how they can be more inclusive. We especially, I think, certainly the last 3 pillars. There's 5 pillars in total, and Pillar 3 sort of asks about, you know, how do you really listen to the voices of your people? You know, how could they bring in new ideas, and you know, and how do you communicate with your employees? You know, how do you build a more a trusting, supportive, and engaging culture that supports workers at all levels? Then I think Pillar 4 kind of goes to your future workforce and a balanced workforce. So, you know, where do you think your talent pool is? It's important to look outside what's been done before and put inclusivity really at the heart of the business. So also review what barriers exist. You know, have you really reviewed sort of like those job descriptions, the person specs? You know, is there anything else that's really getting in the way of developing that future workforce, that future talent pool? You know, is it are there some barriers there that you could perhaps get rid of? And then I think it comes down to you know, being a socially responsible employer in Pillar 5. You know, understanding how policies can impact on the lives of your workers and its supply chain. How can you be more flexible and provide for a more inclusive workforce? You know, more and more we're seeing good employees wanting to work for good employers. And you know, employees these days, they want to work for employers that go beyond a tick box culture. A business that shows commitment to being purpose driven, making an environmental difference, making a difference to the community. Yeah. I think the Good Work Pledge really, just in those 3 pillars alone, really asks a lot of questions that can help you think through, you know, how can my business be more inclusive? You know, how can I get to where I need to be with this?
That's great. And I think that will link to my next question for discussion for Rennie and Colin, because you are both coming from a diverse, you know, reaching out to diverse people. Rennie, you said that ThoughtWorks obviously has a very global presence, and you have been working on diversity. Coming back to Northeast only, do you think that is something a bit harder to reach? Do you see what barriers you have identified when you're trying to implement your D&I strategy from a global perspective to a region which is not as diverse in the tech sector, but in many sectors as well? How do you see yourself? What are the barriers you're facing?
Yeah, it's definitely harder. I think we've noticed that when we look at sourcing candidates and we look at the folks that are applying for jobs into our Northeast branch of ThoughtWorks, is that we're not seeing the diversity that we would expect, which just means we have to work harder. We know that folks exist out there with a variety of backgrounds, and we need to work hard to make sure we're sourcing the right candidates, but also equally looking to see how we partner with different universities, how we offer different entry points into tech for folks that are interested. We don't always hire computer science graduates. We hire career changers at ThoughtWorks as well. And, you know, we can work alongside to sponsor boot camps for diverse candidates looking to do a career change into tech. And we can partner with folks in the Northeast to make that happen. So I think it's challenging, but there are solutions. We just have to work hard and work together.
And I think that's great because people like you are bringing such a diverse mindset, and you're open to collaboration. Going back to now, Colin, because I think, Colin, you work with young people and you're very well aware not everyone would like to be a computer scientist. There are many, many barriers that young people face within the region. So how do you see yourself that, what are the barriers they face? Is there a lack of motivation, or is there lack of opportunity and collaboration from the tech sector to involve young people?
I think there's a couple of things going on. One is that young people aren't as aware of the opportunities that are available within the region, and there's a kind of preconception that digital jobs are available in London or in Manchester, that they're not available here in the Northeast. And actually, whenever you look at it, there's a tremendous variety of opportunities available. So it's making sure that young people are aware of what's actually out there right on their doorstep. But I think that there's also a real challenge in terms of the opportunities that young people are getting to develop their skills. So I was looking at research coming out of, I think it was Ofsted just recently, that suggests that, where you have state schools with a higher proportion of young people on free school meals, they are far less likely to be able to access GCSE computer science, for example. So there's these kind of very quite fundamental barriers that come in well before they're really starting to actually directly access the workplace. And we know all the research is saying that young people are starting to develop a sense of what career they want to explore from about the age of 13, 14, year 9, they're opening up and closing down potential options to them. So I think it's really important to be thinking about, well, what information are they getting at that stage? And that can be quite far away from the employer's perspective, because you're saying, well, you don't want to hire them at that age. Fair enough. But actually some of these issues, we're only going to address it if we take that kind of long-term view over a kind of 10 to 15-year time horizon and engaging with young people quite early to bring them along.
Yeah, that's great. And I think my question would be now for Nitin Shukla, for you, Nitin, because yes, Colin is talking about young people, but I think from our experiences, we are aware that many young people from the ethnically diverse communities, they choose not to engage first. Secondly, they feel that they do not belong, and they tend to move to London or bigger cities or somewhere else. How do we make sure that those young people or those community members understand that yes, there are opportunities, but if there are any barriers, what can we do to remove them?
Yeah, just so very quickly, and just in answering that question, I'll still pick up on a couple of comments that have been made earlier. So this notion of the Northeast not being diverse, I get that compared to Birmingham, Manchester, and other parts of the country. Having said that, if I was to give you the example of what we've done with the police, so in terms of recruitment, it was really static in terms of how the police were able to recruit or find it difficult to recruit people from diverse communities. And it wasn't the fact that people weren't applying. There were people applying, not getting through the process. And so it meant us having to take a different approach beyond compliance, rather than everybody going through in the same way. Very quickly, a positive action program was introduced. People from underrepresented groups were mentored and coached, got to the start line, and then they competed on merit with everybody else. And within 2.5 years of that program being introduced, 100 police officers were recruited from very, very diverse backgrounds. So it goes to show, first of all, that, in terms of that diversity, it is increasing. But it meant that we had to look at different ways in which, because there were people in our communities thinking, I'm not good enough. They didn't see people like themselves in the force, thinking they don't employ people. Do you know what I mean? There were a whole lots of myths and misconceptions. So it was about ensuring that people were given the opportunities, made aware of what those were, but then supported along the way. And what happened was those who were who were successful then started to become ambassadors, because they were then talking to others in the community to say, you didn't think you can do it. Look, I've done it. You can. So I think there is something around understanding that people will have skills and will have something to bring to the table, but necessarily they don't believe that they can do it. And so I think it's through that engagement and encouraging. but then also ensuring that, you know, for whatever reasons, whether it's culturally or whatever, people may not necessarily understand those recruitment processes. And it's really by then, as I say, mentoring, coaching, but just get them to the start line, and then they compete with everybody else on merit, but they're better prepared to give off their very best in those processes. And as I say, with the police, we've seen a huge difference. In recruitment.
And I can personally vouch for that, because I know how much the police services have gone beyond the compliance and have tried to look at many other ways to engage and to engage the community, have changed how the language is perceived. So coming back, I think the language, because moving beyond compliance is more focused on the language that we are using to attract people, is the accessibility. I think these two people really can make a huge difference. So Caroline, because you are representing North of Tyne Combined Authority, and because it's a big authority and you have many people, how do you see that the language guide is at North of Tyne Combined Authority for people to be attracted towards the tech sector?
I think that's probably a question, you know, that we should probably ask, and there's many different people to be involved in that. But I think specifically with regard to the, the Good Work Pledge, I guess we're putting the message out there to employers that, maybe there needs to be other things that we're doing to help people, attract people to the industry, whether that's adult returners to work and we have low confidence, ex-offenders, young people. It's like, how do we reach those people and tell them about the opportunities that are available and how they themselves actually see that as a viable option for them? So I think the bigger question that you ask, I think something that needs to probably be taken away and discussed with some of their colleagues, but certainly in terms of Good Work Pledge anyway, it's about kind of like, making sure that we're asking employers to think about how they're doing things, how they can remove barriers, how they can create more opportunities.
And I think because of obviously we as a charity, and I've seen the Good Work Pledge and such a great initiative, and whoever is listening with us today, it's not restricted to anybody. It's quite accessible. The information is out there and it makes you think. And it is such an easy process, and the help is there. So it really is a learning point for you as an organization as well. It's not just to get that tab that you have a Good Work Pledge, but also so many areas to look at and really progress through. So thank you very much. And I think, Rennie, obviously I'm very conscious of time as well. Rennie, ThoughtWorks, I personally follow them on every social media. The imaging, the messaging that you give out on Instagram, on Facebook, is so thought-provoking. It's easy, simple, but it's so diverse and inclusive. Can you give us a bit of some tips to our listeners here? How do we make sure? Do we need an extra person to do it, or is it like a team effort to get all these messaging out?
I think it's a team effort, but I also think that it starts from your leadership. So all of our senior leadership team members are executive sponsors for specific, we call them affinity groups. So we have neurodiversity affinity group, race and ethnicity, gender. We have a variety of different diversity groups. I personally chair the race and ethnicity group, and that's where I make sure that I hold our business to account about what we want to try to achieve in that space. I promote and I support and I grow some of our leaders that are volunteering to be leaders in those different groups. And that's where I think you really make the big difference. And then, as you show people support, then people will want to share that message out. You can't force people, but I think when you create the culture of let's celebrate our diversity, then that will follow.
That's great. And moving on to now, Colin, obviously you are in the leadership. You're leading a charity, you represent young people of Northeast, and you're trying your best to make sure that they have STEM education, they're aware of the opportunities. What would you like to, add to this wonderful conversation that we are having? Do you think it is important now to make sure that we hold accountable our authorities, our educational institutes, of what they are actually bringing to the young people? Because I think we focused a lot on mental health as well in the report, and there's still so much mental health and well-being issue going on with the young people.
I would say that I hold schools and organisations that work with young people in generally very high regard, and I think in a lot of circumstances are doing very difficult work very admirably. The thing for me is always around collaboration and cooperation, and I think you mentioned a little bit of that earlier. About seeing where all of the organisations that have a shared interest in this space, because at the end of the day, we all kind of want the same thing here, but we all have slightly different things to offer. So it's about, well, where can you work in collaboration with other organisations? Where can a charity like ours work productively with schools that complements what they're doing instead of trying to sort of replace it or butt up against it? Where can we work productively with employers to provide opportunities? Because I really do believe in the power and strength of us coming together to try and address these challenges. And one of the things that struck me in your introductory comments, Freya, I must say, is that whenever I first sort of joined in this panel, I felt like a little bit of an imposter, if I'm being absolutely honest, because I'm like the straight white guy in the panel talking about EDI, and I thought, what can I genuinely offer and contribute? But you said, well, we've all got to do this, and you're absolutely right. We've all got a role to play, and I can't absolve myself of responsibility of that. So in that sense of collaboration and cooperation, we've all got to chip in and not say it's your problem over there, or you've got to work on that, or who can I bring in to deal with it? We've all got to deal with it. We've all got to work on it, and I think that's a really important and key bit to collaborate and cooperate.
And I think in my role with Dynamo, I've always said, do not just see that I'm an ethnic person, and we need to come out of this shackle that we have surrounded ourselves with, that it is an ethnic person's responsibility to lead on EDI. It is not. It is completely not. There are many protected characteristics, and I think your voice coming, because when an ethnic person raises a voice on EDI, and if other community members join them, it is stronger. The same is with the LGBT community, same as with neurodiversity. I think we should not burden them to lead on EDI. We need to all come together, because I would really like to see a white person holding the plaque. Oh, yes, I am diverse. I don't need a black picture to be posted on an ad, because come on, we are a Netflix world. We can't be like really trying to fit. And this is the concept. This is what we are trying to bring to this session today and make our listeners think. Move beyond compliance, be innovative, be human, because EDI is all about humanity. So we would like to end with this, but before, because I'm very conscious of time, but I would like to pick up one-liner on moving beyond compliance before we leave. Nitin, what will be your one-liner for moving beyond compliance for today? You are mute. Sorry, Nitin. Sorry.
How many times have we heard that over the past 2 years? Apologies. My one-liner goes back to what was just said a little earlier around beyond compliance, and that's about, this is about humanity and compassion, about making a difference. So what will we do in our organizations that really going to make a difference?
That's great. Caroline, quickly, because Claire we have to wrap up. So Caroline, your one-liner or any word for moving beyond compliance.
Yeah, I think it's just really embracing, exploring how we can do things differently. A lot of businesses are doing that already, but it's like, what can we really do to kind of really explore this and do something quite different to make a difference?
That's great. Rini?
Yeah, I was to say, we've never really looked at compliance as a business. I think it's similar to what Nitin said. It's about, the world is full of diverse people. Our businesses should be full of diverse people. We're solving world problems with software. Let's have those people be represented in the creation.
Thank you. Colin?
I would say, meaningfully moving beyond compliance isn't always easy. It requires a long-term commitment, but that makes it no less worthwhile and valuable because it is critically important.
Thank you very much. So now it comes to an end of this session, moving beyond compliance. My ask would be from all of you is, let's do it together. We can do it. We are going to do it. Don't think of the timeline. We are not up with competition with any region. We are a very diverse, great region with huge talent. Let's be together. Embrace difference. As Dynamo say, embrace it, dignify it, inspire it. Let me now thank you very much all the panelists for joining in and all our listeners today. Thank you very much. Let's bring in on Susan Bell again, and she would introduce you to our next session, which is lined up for the conference. Have a great day, everybody, and be diverse, be inclusive, because we are different, we are equal, and that's the same difference that binds us together. Thank you very much.
Well, wow. Thank you again, Freya, Caroline, Colin, Nitin and Renee. Hugely thought-provoking and a very clear call to action for all of us to engage with the EDI challenge, to enable us to embrace doing things differently, embrace humanity. We can only benefit in our businesses, sector and region. So please go forth and challenge your organization and the constructs around that. And as a reminder, if you would like to delve into the detail of the Think Northeast report or the Good Work Pledge, please do get in touch. We said that we would share that information with you. We're actually coming to the end of today. So on behalf of everyone at the conference, I'd also like to thank Mike Goodwin from SAGE and all of our thought leaders, speakers, panelists, and to all of you for contributing to yet another successful Dynamo conference. And of course, there's more to come tomorrow with the in-person day at Northumbria University. It's starting at 8:30. And I'm thrilled to say we're joined by Sir Jim Mackey, Chief Executive of Northumbria Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust. He'll be delivering our keynote. We'll also hear from Charlie Holt, co-founder of Dynamo, and David Dunn, Chief Exec at Sunderland Software City. They'll be sharing their thoughts on the joining together of these two organisations. And there's another great program of sessions that are going to be coming up. So please take a look at the chat channel. It'll show you that full set of programs. But a couple of things that caught my eye were digital for the authentic audience, connection in the arts, developing digital solutions that change lives, and how did Scottish giants change the future of AI? Certainly lots to have a look at. So take a look at the program. There's also going to be an immersive tech showcase and exhibition. So don't miss out. Head over to their stands. They'll be available from 8:30 too. So as today draws to a close, I'd like to thank once again SAGE, our headline partners, and our event partners and supporters, Blue Sky, Gateshead Council, MediaWorks, Nomad Digital, Tombola, Sunderland City Council, and UK Tech Cluster Group. And not forgetting huge appreciation for the Dynamo team. They've been working tirelessly to get this event to happen and resolving technical issues that started first thing this morning with issues around hop-in and ensuring that all of your voices can be heard. So massive appreciation to them. I'm sure they're desperate for a cuppa, but I know that they're having to head over to Northumbria to ensure that it's ready to welcome you tomorrow morning. So finally, a thank you to all of you for joining today. We hope you've enjoyed it, and I certainly hope to see you all in person tomorrow morning. Thank you.